What's up, guys? Thank you for clicking on the video. So in this one, I'm going to visit an issue that's very interesting. Tons of EVs are really coming out, and we see that big push by GM, FCA a little bit. Ford obviously is making some big moves towards Jeep with the Bronco. So in this one, we're going to talk about the top 10 reasons or so why EVs have a distinct advantage off-road and with overlanding, but there are some cons. We're going to talk about those. And then towards the end, we're going to take a quick look at the new Hummer. Lots of interesting details if you haven't seen it yet, so stick around for that. We're also going to look at the Bronco. Tons of design features, and I'm going to tell you why Ford's relationship with Rivian is probably going to lead that Bronco to be quite a competitor with the Hummer as well. So lots in this video, guys. Stick around. You're watching KnightDriveTV. So guys, if you haven't been with me before, you'll know that I've spent all of my life in the automotive aftermarket in some sector. I've been a hobbyist since the very beginning, had lots of shops over the years, moved around, tried to scale up, ended up on a couple TV shows and SEMA every year. It's just, the automotive aftermarket is my life, and that's why I started this channel. I'm not just a guy that says, hey, I'm an accountant, I really love cars, I'm going to start a channel. This really is an extension of my entire existence. So I appreciate you watching the video. If you haven't seen it before, maybe take a look around my channel and see if there's something you like. A little bit of something for everyone. I do 3D printing, fabrications coming, lots of different things with off-road and on-road. So in this one, we're going to talk about the 10 reasons that EVs have some very distinct advantages over gas and even diesel-powered off-road vehicles. As always, guys, I have links in the description for a timeline. If you're on a PC, you may see some chapters at the bottom, but we're going to go pretty quickly. So number 10, let's call it, is torque. Torque is a big advantage off-road, especially going with a larger tire. And the way that you can do, we gear down off-road, and the reason that we have transfer case and low range gears is to basically act as a torque multiplier. Well, the distinct advantage is electric motors make 100% of their torque the moment that they turn. And this is why we've seen diesel electric locomotives in trains for many decades. Electric is really, the onset of torque is immediate. So that's a big advantage, and I think that's something that people off-road will always appreciate. Number 9 is four-wheel drive is very easy to achieve with EVs, and they can do it with very little chassis changes, so to speak. Basically, you can make a two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive platform with EVs, depending on the electric motor configuration. And of course, we've seen some electric motors incorporated into the transmission, like say for the NSX, for example, it has two front hub electric motors for the front wheels, and then it has an electric motor incorporated into the transmission. With the Rivian, which we've seen, they have hub motors. So it's very easy to achieve four-wheel drive with EV platforms and have individual wheel control, which leads to number 8. So number 8 is individual wheel control. And the beauty of individual wheel control is things like we've seen with the Rivian to do the tank turn. In addition to that, you'll see some people, rock crawlers, they'll have individual handbrakes. They can hold a particular wheel in place so that it can pivot around. And we actually see that utilized in the 2021 Bronco. Even though it is a gas-powered vehicle, it's incorporated that with, I suppose, leveraging the anti-lock braking system. But with EVs, you can go even further, turning one wheel backwards, say the right rear, turning it backwards in an essence to pivot a vehicle around something. And we've seen even with the new Hummer, crab walking, having individual motors in the wheels allows individual steering with minimal drivetrain components, which then leads to number 7, which is the architecture of EVs is very simple in comparison sometimes to gas engines. When you have one central power unit with a gas or diesel engine, of course you're going to have drive shafts going to either to a transfer case going to a front end, a rear end, a third member, whatever you want to call it. These are all more components with more failure points. U-joints can fail, drive shafts and pinion shafts, all these things can fail. And it's because you're trying to redirect a lot of power from one central power unit. And so that adds to complexity. And obviously you put on skid plates, you put on armor, things to defend against that. And look, guys have figured it out. They've made bulletproof vehicles as far as building them and modifying vehicles. But from the factory, something stock, yes, you have skid plates and things like that, but an EV can be truly armored underneath and really have almost no points of vulnerability. So that's a big advantage. Let's go to number 6. I think we're on number 6. Water fording ability. Really, the Teslas have shown, and Elon Musk has even pointed out, hey, you can drive a Model S like underwater. It doesn't need oxygen to turn, to run. It doesn't have an exhaust. So, really the biggest threat is water into the interior and things like that. But these, the motors are sealed, obviously, the battery packs are sealed. And so water fording capability is pretty incredible. Snorkels and all these things that have allowed us to get through water and avoid dust and induction into the intake system. Electrics just don't have these issues and these challenges. So water fording is a big one. Number 5, multiple motors means a very unique limp home capability. And again, getting away from that centralized single power unit, if you did have some type of failure that wasn't obviously power related in terms of the vehicle's core power unit, if it had an individual motor failure or something of that nature, you have potentially 2 others, 3 others, depending on how the vehicle is designed. But generally speaking, you have a limp home possibility for vehicles that are geared to off-road operation. Number 4 would be the low center of gravity from the battery packs. And a lot of these vehicles are utilizing a skateboard type of setup. There is some talk of Tesla moving away from the skateboard technology, so to speak. Architecture is a better word. He is talking now about structural battery packs and things like that. Generally speaking, with all of these vehicles, regardless of how they use and package the battery packs, the best place for them is between the front and rear wheels, down low. So low center of gravity with high off angle and, scenarios off-road, that's the best place for weight to be to avoid rollovers, to enhance climbing capability, things like that. Number 3 is the fact that you just have a tremendous amount of onboard power already available. And so this is obvious to a point. 12 volts, accessories, lighting, things for a rooftop tent, just basic features that run off of 12 volt. Obviously, that's available with the battery packs, even if they're in much higher voltage configurations. You have inverters, you have converters, you have different things to get different types of power from that centralized DC power source. But in addition, these vehicles obviously have air conditioning, they have heat, and so this could be something that automakers can add an optional duct that goes up through the roof that you can tap into at a rooftop tent. This heat and air conditioning in that sense is a big advantage, and it's something that a lot of people battle when they're doing overlanding and things like that, is how do you stay cool and stay warm? This is a luxury that really could be a big advantage factor for EVs. Number 2 is storage. And again, when you're going off-road and overlanding especially, you're trying to bring as much with you as possible. And it's just undeniable that the way that these EVs are built, as you can see in the Rivians, as you can see in the Teslas, they have the front trunk, so to speak. They have a rear trunk. And so with pickup trucks, it's going to be the same. They're going to have a lot of storage up front, things that you could put over the front axle, essentially, things that can go in the bed, things that can go above the bed. So, the advantages of the fact that you can not only add a lot more storage to these vehicles, but you can place the storage in areas that are directly over axles. And so that's good for weight distribution. And it's just a huge advantage that you don't have a gas powered because of the space taken up by the gas tanks, which tend to be towards the rear and extreme rear. And then the engine tends to be extremely up front. So, it's just the weight distribution of EVs is a huge advantage for storage and for performance. Lastly, and for some people, most importantly, is the fact that it just further enhances what used to be called tread lightly. And, way back when I was super young, I wish I watched, but I read, Peterson's Off-Road magazine, I believe it was, or Peterson's four-wheeler. I always remember that Toyota sponsored the idea of tread lightly. And that's just to have minimal impact on the environment when you go out there. It's just a more emissions-friendly, lower impact type of vehicle to send out into areas where it's often national parks or areas where there's a lot of wildlife. So EVs are quiet. EVs don't put out the fumes, the gases, the things that kill plant life. And it allows us to enjoy the outdoors and probably end up with less regulation, maybe less restriction, to enjoy the things that are around this country in the open land. So those are all the real distinct advantages I think that EVs have. But These complex systems, I think, for people who feel like they're far off grid and far from the beaten path, could have some concerns about having very complex systems managing these vehicles. Now, it's going to come down to how these systems are packaged, but it's also going to come down to limp home modes. I think that's the very important factor for a lot of these. Another factor that is against EVs, I think in some scenarios to where we are pushing the vehicles and we are putting them in scenarios to where, there is a danger involved, and that's sharp rocks, piercing battery packs, exposing wires, and putting yourself kind of in danger with some very high voltages. And this is something that first responders, and me being a former paramedic years ago, when airbags were coming out heavily in the 90s and a lot of cars had them, it was a huge concern for first responders, and a lot of people actually got really injured.
Technology is advancing so quickly that the emergency services can't keep up with the changes. Once you affect the power cell, the battery, okay, there's no telling what's going to happen. If something grounds that battery out, if a foreign agent is introduced to that battery, it could continue to burn.
Well, sometimes on off-road and rock crawling, you see people very close to the vehicle. Things do get dented up and damaged. It's a small factor. It's probably unlikely, but it's something I thought could be an issue. So we'll see. So number 3 is weight, again, but in a different way. Earlier, I talked about weight distribution, basically. The low center of gravity, the advantages of battery packs, that is an advantage. But inherently, we see that the weights, the overall weights of EVs are quite heavy because battery technology, power density, using these basically condensed battery packs, they're quite large and they weigh a lot. Off-road, there is advantages for less mass. Same with a road course, a racetrack. In extreme environments where extreme performance is required, less mass is generally always better. Technology with drive modes, with traction management technologies, that's what will have to basically counter lower mass. And we're seeing that with sports cars. We're seeing that with launch control modes. Even though the ZL11LE, the Corvette Z06 got bloated in weight compared to years prior, they were able to overcome that to some degree. But again, that always comes with a compromise of using tires more, using brakes more, things like that. It's going to always put some type of time scale, say limitation on how soon is it before you can be a global overlander with an EV. It's probably going to be some time. So that's going to be a challenge long term as far as gas vehicles and diesels. Diesel is obviously available worldwide. And so there's just going to be a lure for people that are doing global trips to stick with certain other forms of propulsion before EVs really take over that space. But again, that's a thing for time. Time will tell on that. We'll see. The last challenge that I think that some companies are going to face is that some are a lot further ahead in EV technology development than others. GM has been developing EV technologies for many years, and way back in the 90s, they had a car that they put out that was kind of on a lease basis. I think it was the EV1 or something. It was kind of like a Saturn, kind of looked like, but they took all the cars back. Honda has partnered with GM recently because of their extensive technology in electrics. Now, Toyota is very established with hybrids. I think they're in a good position. They've been racing in the WEC with the Toyota prototypes. They've been pushing the envelope in terms of hybrid technology. So I think GM's good. Toyota's definitely good. The VW group, even though they're not really that integrated into our truck market, Volkswagen has talked about building kind of an overland and mid-size pickup for the US market. They have great technology with hybrid. So they're a factor in the future, not really here right now. You could see something with AMG, maybe resurrecting the G-Wagon or elevating it to some extent to making it a little bit more of an overland vehicle and getting into that EV competition. But I think the one who is probably in the most trouble and has the most to defend is Jeep, and Jeep is owned by FCA. FCA just merged with PSA, and they created a very interesting named company, which I can't even frankly remember right now. It's something very strange, but basically it's like the Peugeot group mixed with FCA, Chrysler, Jeep. All these brands are going to be combined. You're not probably going to see much of a change per se, but none of those companies, to my knowledge, really have an extensive amount of EV technology bases. The PSA group, they bought Opel. They bought some very interesting brands that in the downturn when GM went bankrupt, they sold. It's just a conglomerate of a lot of companies which kind of tend to reside in France and Europe and not here. So we will have to see, but Jeep is probably going to need some type of partner to compete with this upcoming EV challenge. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously Ram and the TRX Ram, the big supercharged 6.2 liter Hemi that come out of the Hellcat, these are cool vehicles that FCA is really having a great time producing. And I think it's a huge advantage, and I guess the clothes are done. But basically, we will have to see how FCA manages that. So time will tell. Ford, they're in a position that they have explored some hybrid technology, but they are heavily invested in a company named Rivian. And Rivian very strangely put out a very Ford-looking kind of four-door compact pickup, which I saw at CES here this last year. And it has some very unique off-road capabilities. I did speak to a rep at Rivian. He did say they were working to incorporate their technology into a current Ford platform. So it's going to be interesting. And then the Cybertruck, which, who knows what will happen. Elon usually closes the deal on bringing things that he mentions to fruition, but at what time frame, I think, is the real question here. And I will say that as interesting as the Cybertruck looked, the Hummer is very aggressive from GM. And I will say, knowing GM and following GM from Corvette perspectives, for GM to really invest in something and get into something, it needs a very solid business case. GM just doesn't take the risk that you've seen FCA take with, say, the Dodge Viper. Very, very small business case to build that vehicle as extreme as they did. They did it anyway, and they paid for it. Ford will take huge risks, like things with the Ford GT, the Mustang GT 500, things that are kind of low volume for such a big automaker. GM just doesn't do this kind of stuff. GM will only make something if they have a very strong business case internally, long-term, to invest. And Mary Barra has been very motivated with EVs. They do say that they want to push the entire company to EVs. So they are definitely going all in, as it seems. And I think through the Corvette, through all their major platforms, these will act as halos. The Hummer really came out with some very bold moves, and people were saying, oh, $120,000, that's a crazy price. But that's kind of what Tesla did. They started off with a very high-end product, a very niche product, and they built kind of the brand on that idea. And then as they sold more, recovered more investment, basically they started to trickle that down to where now you have the price of the Model S coming down. The Model 3 obviously is very affordable. So I think that's probably the direction GM is going here. So the Hummer, I must say, I have some press video here of just some of the features. Check out this video of the crab walk capability here. They did a great overhead shot showing the theory of just having individually driven wheels and the simplicity that they can incorporate into multi-wheel steering to do crab walking. Very nice interior, obviously huge torque numbers that they claim. And that you can do that with EVs because they're going to be measuring torque at the onset, the initial turn. Not sure on how these transmissions are configured. Most are probably single gear, maybe multi-gear. I'm not sure on that. But that's going to be a torque number as soon as it turns. And so 11,000, I think 500 foot-pounds is what they claim. But 0 to 60 number is huge. A little concerning that we have vehicles that are going to be 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 pounds, accelerating 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I would like to see braking in 100 feet and under if they're going to have 0 to 60 that fast, because sports cars that go 0 to 60 in 2.9 tend to stop 60 to 0 in about 100 feet. So I'm thinking a 7,000 pound Hummer with obviously a tread wear rating tire, a much harder tire, is probably going to be far beyond that. So I think there's a safety issue in just putting a vehicle capable of that kind of acceleration in the hands of people that are just going to come tearing out of parking lots in a 7,000 pound Hummer, but whatever. But I think stock 35s on this, which is also the Sasquatch package Bronco on 35s, but a very interesting lift suspension on this Hummer. They're saying about 6 inches of instant lift available with an I believe it's like an airbag type of suspension. They are saying it can accommodate 37s with very minimal modification. Now, I assume some of this will either be software. That's kind of an issue. I'm wondering how these vehicles, these EVs, are going to deal with the mods that the off-road community is used to. And inevitably, people all want to lift further than is stock. They want to go with a little bit bigger tire, but when you're getting in the realm of 37s, I mean, you're covering 90% of off-roaders, I think, in terms of 37 and under. So, you know, interesting capability from the factory there. Obviously, a very luxury interior, very interesting experience from inside the cab while you have this extreme off-road capability. So, just a lot of the you know, a lot of the media coverage and the B-roll that they provided, they did show an under shot looking up at the vehicle, and to really show a lot of that armor. And, you know, they are basically showing that this vehicle, they believe, is ready to take people off-road, but then completely comfortable on-road. And I think that's what you're trying to see with a lot of these vehicles is people want them to do a little bit of everything and do it well. So it's an incredible basically assembly of engineering and ideas into one package, which is really impressive. And the 2021 Bronco has a ton of unique ideas on it. And I'm so impressed with Ford taking the chance and seeing things like the limb risers on the fenders, the camera mounts on the dashboard, the sway bar disconnect that's immediate. You don't have to be on level ground. You hit a button, boom, you've disconnected the sway bars for more articulation out of the factory independent front suspension, the IFS setup. So what I was about to say is that I really enjoy the new Bronco, the design features of all these vehicles, but here I am editing and I realized that I had lost audio at some point right there. And that's the nature of the game, I suppose, folks. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I was about to wrap it up anyway. That was kind of a big overview of all the cool things that could happen here with EVs. We're seeing a lot of the big OEMs really push towards creating some things that are pretty exciting and have a lot of, you know, very unique qualities. That's something that I think as the automotive landscape got kind of boring, all of a sudden we see some very exciting things coming out of a lot of different manufacturers. So obviously I'm going to get to it here, guys. Get back out to the garage, have lots of projects to kind of keep on moving. Going to be wiring and doing the welder videos and things for our Overland Pathfinder, and of course a lot more Corvette stuff. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. The few of you that probably made it this far, it was kind of a blab video. I don't really care for them, but you know, inevitably I like talking about cars. So see you on the next one, guys. Thank you very much for watching Night Drive TV and all your support. I super appreciate it. So catch you on the next one.